Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
Welcome, everyone, to the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. I'm glad you could join me. Make sure you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com, and share this episode with your family and friends because I got a great guest coming on. I have author and filmmaker Dinesh D'Souza here, just putting out a new film, Vindicating Trump. You could go to vindicatingtrump.com to see where it's playing. I encourage everyone to go see it. And Dinesh, welcome back to the PAS Report.
Hey, it's a great pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, I always love talking to you, and you're so creative when you're doing these films. And in this one, you link back to history a little bit. You compare the parallels between Trump and Lincoln. I think that's important because these were two divisive figures in American history, and they had both admiration towards them and disdain towards them. So how does Trump compare to Lincoln's time?
Well, with regard to the polarization or the division, I think that Trump and Lincoln are unique in that you have one group of people who would take a bullet for them. And then you have another group of people who would be not unhappy if somebody else put a bullet into them. So that is not normal political division. That is very extreme. And yet, in the case of Lincoln, it wasn't about him. It was not about Lincoln the man. The division was over the issue, slavery, the extension of slavery. With Trump, it is over the man. The division is over Trump. And so this provides a way for me to focus the movie on Trump. What is it about him that brings out this kind of reaction? Now, another connection here is this. Lincoln gave a speech early in his career. He was actually in his late 20s. And the speech was, I believe, 1838, called the Lyceum Speech. And Lincoln says that you can't really destroy America from the outside. But if destruction occurs, it'll come from the inside. But from where? Well, Lincoln says that there will be a rising tide of lawlessness in our society. And then along will come a Caesar or a Napoleon, a kind of a powerful, tyrannical figure who will exploit the lawlessness and subvert the constitutional republic. Now, the Democrats go, oh yeah, Lincoln was prophetic. Here we go, Donald Trump. He's the guy that Lincoln was warning against. And so in the film, and by the way, there's an accompanying book of the same title, I explore this exact question. Yes, there is a dictatorial or tyrannical threat. Is it coming from Trump or is it coming really from the other side?
And I want to explore that a little bit because when we look at the lawlessness that we see, when we look at how the Democrats, the media, the big tech, education system, and the bureaucracy itself have all targeted him as this threat to democracy. If we're being realistic, would the bureaucracy ever let Trump become a dictator?
No, but I think the more important issue is that he has no intention of becoming a dictator. And the proof is that he was already in office. You know, it's one thing for people to say, hey, if Trump is ever elected, he will do this and he would do that. But Trump has been in office. So you can't really compare him to Hitler circa 1933, because as soon as Hitler came in, he passed the Enabling Act. It was immediate repression of civil liberties. It wasn't like Hitler governed rather democratically and peacefully for one term and then came back and suddenly became a dictator. So I think with Trump, the experience belies that idea. Now, admittedly, Trump does stuff like he'll joke about being dictator for a day. Trump is a bit of a stand-up comedian. And I think the left knows that he's joking, but they pretend to take him serious. He said he was going to be dictator for a day. I mean, how can you even take this stuff seriously? Meanwhile, look at what the left and the Democrats are doing. I mean, they're doing all the signature elements of a police state. If you look at police states around the world, they have mass surveillance, they have systematic censorship, they have criminalization of political differences, they have trying to lock up the opponent, the leading figure in the opposition party. All those things are being done, but they're not being done by Trump. They're being done by the Democrats.
Yeah, and I view it as the bureaucracy is actually the biggest threat to the country. I mean, the second Trump got in, even before he got in, at every step of the way, they tried to undermine his entire administration to take him down, and they haven't relented at all. When you're looking at the lawfare, and then, as you just said, the censorship, trying to silence the voices, do you think that the social engineering that's been going on for quite a long time has been successful where millions of Americans actually believe this stuff? They buy into the fact that Trump's a dictator, that the end of democracy, there's never going to be another election. Do you think that the Democrats have been successful in their social engineering of our society?
They have had some moderate success, but the success is only for this reason. Independent and middle of the road voters are not exposed to conservative media for the most part, but they cannot avoid being exposed to leftist propaganda, the mainstream media. And so they get a one-sided diet of information, and inevitably some of them believe it. They go, well, I saw it, on P.B.S., and then it was in the New York Times, and then I saw this professor talking about it on NPR. So they figure that because so they see it over here, they see it over there. Well, it kind of has to be true. So there is a challenge on the part of the Trump campaign and us to get our message out widely. And really, this is why I make films. I discovered that films have a much wider reach than books. Also, films are able to convey information really as a story rather than as an argument. They're able to show rather than tell. And as a result, they appeal both to the head and to the heart. Films are a way to do an end run around the mainstream media. They're also a way to do an end run around digital censorship. This film is in about 850 theaters, so it's nationwide. In the aftermath of COVID, I had to do a little more restricted distribution, particularly theatrical distribution. But I'm happy to say the film is really all over the country, and Vindicating Trump is the website. If you put in your city, boom, the theaters will pop up. So try to see it opening weekend if you can.
Yeah, everyone, and as I said, everyone should go see it. And vindicatingtrump.com, as you said. And you're one of the most creative filmmakers that I see when you make these films. And in this film, you recreate certain like war room strategies that they use against Trump, where they're devising plans against him. Can you give the audience an example of some of these war room strategies that took place?
I mean, the reason for the recreations is this. We have a sort of an interesting question, right? You've got these institutions. Let's take, for example, CNN or the New York Times. Now, when Trump was convicted of 34 felonies, this is in the Alvin Bragg case in New York, like, what is the reaction at the New York Times? Do they view this with equanimity? Oh, interesting. This is something we need to cover. Or do they jump out of their seats and like high five each other? We did it, man. Maggie Haberman, your articles really helped to get him, and congratulations, and so on. So we give the audience a sort of a delightful window into the behind the scenes. And it's partly a way of saying that movies have to be entertaining. Movies are not the same as books. People go to the films for fun. And if you make an entertaining movie, you can put in a lot of messaging, a lot of information, a lot of intellectual content. But the intellectual content by itself doesn't really work as a film. And that's really why films have music. The music is kind of the emotional score of the movie. So I have a book that's going to, in a more systematic way, lay out the argument, make the case for Trump. And I have the film, which is a very different kind of storytelling.
And one of the things that I always found interesting was how Trump is not an ideologue, right? I mean, he's not this true and pride and true conservative that has pushing conservatism for years on end. To Trump, everything is negotiable. Understanding that, why didn't the Democrats try and work with him when he first came to office in 2017, as opposed to undermining him?
It was a fatal mistake on their part because they could have wooed Trump. And in fact, he was closer to them culturally than he was to us or to the Republicans, to the conservatives. But they made the great mistake of immediately targeting him as the enemy. Now, why did they do that? Here's why. In one of the opening scenes of the film, I have the iconic scene. Trump is, 2015, he's coming down the escalator, announcing that he's running for president for the first time. Now, envision that and focus on it for a moment, because the way I see it, at the top of the escalator, imaginatively, are all the cultural elites. Oprah's there, and Ellen DeGeneres, and Charlie Rose, and Larry King, and all the people that thought Trump was the coolest cat of all the cool cats. And they all wanted to be seen with him and photographed with him. And then he does something very fateful. He gets in the escalator and he goes down. He descends. Now, where does he descend? In my view, right down there at the bottom of the escalator are like the forgotten Americans, the guys who have been kind of screwed over by politics over the past 30 years. Neither party has paid attention to them. Their jobs have been traded abroad. These are guys who basically, their standard of living and their families are in worse shape than they have been over the past few decades. And Trump joins their team. And so you can see right there why they would be so loyal to him, so attached to him. It's like he didn't have to do it. He wasn't even one of us, but he's taken up our cause. Meanwhile, for the cultural elites at the top of the escalator, Trump is a traitor. It's like, where are you going? You're joining the pitchfork people down there and turning against us. So they saw the same people who once loved Trump now saw him as the ultimate traitor to his class, the ultimate turncoat, the ultimate. They feel that he stabbed them in the back, and so they made him public enemy number one.
It really is amazing when you look at how they treated him prior to announcing he was running for president, and then afterwards they all wanted to be his friend, and then they tried to label him as toxic when they're the ones that are toxic. But what concerns me even more is a week ago you had over 700 national security experts come out, say that they're supporting Kamala Harris for president. I'll remind the audience, these are the same people that were involved in 20 years of war in Afghanistan and lied to us by saying that they were making progress, that the Afghan government was stable, that the Afghan security forces can hold their own. Meanwhile, the Taliban is better armed and equipped today than prior to 9/11. It's the same national security experts that tried to say that Miranda Devine's reporting was Russian disinformation, Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. And it's the same people that have lied to the forgotten class that you're talking about for over 40 years. What do you make of all these national security, quote unquote, experts coming out? And how far are they willing to go to prevent a Trump presidency?
First of all, these guys are all running a racket. War is a racket. And I got to say that as someone who cut his teeth in the Reagan era, we had a little bit of a blind spot about this going back to the 80s and early 90s. And here's why. In the Reagan era, we basically understood very well that government is a kind of looting operation. We understood very well that welfare programs fattened and enriched a whole bureaucracy that was leeching off of them. We understood that this was true in the domestic sphere of government, but we sort of made an exception for the national security apparatus. And I think it was because we were fighting a Cold War. And so even though there were reports of, the Defense Department spending $300 on a coffee pot, we sort of looked the other way because we thought this is a necessary fight. Who cares? But we've come to understand much better that we now have an intelligence industry and a kind of a defense industry. And when we give money to foreign countries, it doesn't really go to them. It goes to Lockheed and Raytheon to make weapons. And by and large, perpetual war is the way these guys stay in business, the same way that the poverty industry stays in business by creating more poor people and more homeless people that you have to keep servicing and giving benefits to. So this is the point that you have a war in the Middle East or war in Iraq, that's closing its shop. So let's start one up in Ukraine. A migrating desire to keep the weapons industry going. And that's what these people are all about. We've learned, I think, that we can't trust these people. They've earned our distrust. And I think one of the things that Trump has exposed is that the rot goes far deeper than we thought. I mean, who would have thought you can't trust the CDC, the NIH? This is the people in the white coats, doctors that you're normally, when you go in for a checkup, they're like, Nick, we're going to take out your... we'll take out your appendix next week. And you're like, sure, I guess something's wrong with my appendix. Nobody goes, prove it. Show it to me. What's wrong with my appendix? I don't trust you. So I think that we've now recognized how bad the problem is and how much needs to be done.
And in the film, I mean, you sat down with the man himself. You sat down with Trump. You sat down with a lot of people that are close to him. How does he intend to fix the corruption, the deep-rooted corruption within the bureaucracy? How does he attempt to rein it in?
I'm not sure, but this is what I would recommend, and that is you need to find a cadre of people that are, number one, very interested in the details of bureaucratic structure and policy, and have a certain kind of manic passion for burrowing into these agencies and departments and cleaning them out. So surgical fumigation, if you will. Uh, the kind of person I'm thinking of is a Vivek Ramaswamy or a Ron DeSantis. These are basically policy people, and these are people who are very interested in the inner workings of government. And so you deploy them because it's not enough to just walk into, say, the FBI, swap out the guy at the top and think you fixed the problem. They have created a perverse incentive structure in which the ordinary FBI agent, for example, who's not all that political, thinks, you know what, if I arrest another January 6th family, I'm going to get a promotion. I'm going to get a commendation. On the other hand, if I go after, say, child traffickers, well, that's just not a priority in the FBI. So that's what I'm getting at. They've created bureaucratic carrots and sticks that are encouraging people to do bad things. And it needs to be cleaned out at that level. Those incentives need to be restructured.
And do you think his idea of Elon Musk, heading some government efficiency task force, you think that's a good idea?
I think it's a good idea, but I'm always skeptical of just, another task force. I mean, we need a
Blue
little bit
ribbon
more of
panel.
we need the bulldozer approach as opposed to a committee that will produce a report.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's part of the problem with the Republicans. They issue white paper after white paper that no one ever looks at. That's why films like yours are so important and people need to see them, because people actually watch films. They're not going to read some white paper on an obscure conservative website or something. And so I like the idea of the film. Now, you sat down with the man, and what insights? Did you gain new insights from him? Is there something that's going to resonate with the audience more than others?
I have over the past few years, really beginning with what Trump giving me my pardon. This was over a campaign finance violation, as you know. The I've gotten to sort of see Trump up close. I don't claim to be like one of his buddies, but on the other hand, I've seen a private dimension of the man that he doesn't like to show in public. Why? He has a manly resistance to showing his feelings, to showing any vulnerability, even to showing the inner workings of his mind. And yet that dimension of Trump is very appealing. For example, Trump is famously egotistical in public. He loves commendations and praise. He loves, got the greatest economy of all time. He does all that stuff. It's part of his shtick. In private, he's not like that. He's actually very whimsical. He's pretty self-deprecating. He's a genuinely nice guy. And I thought, wow, if the American people could see that side of him, I mean, it's not like it's a radically different side, but it rounds out the picture. So I worked really hard in this interview to bring out an element of Trump that completes the picture of the man, but is often not seen on the public stage.
And that's so important because the reason people do gravitate to him is he's authentic. I mean, he is real. He's someone that you can relate to. On the flip side of that, you have Kamala Harris, who uses a lot of words, but says absolutely nothing. However, she has the entire apparatus behind her. Do you think that the apparatus behind her is too big to defeat, or do you think that looking at Trump, he's the only person in this moment in time that could actually defeat the apparatus?
Yes, I think in that sense he's not just the best guy, but he's the only guy. And I think that they are, it reminds me of the old Western, right? In the old Western movies, which are pretty much my only exposure to America before I came here as a teenager and as an exchange student, I'd watch these films. And all the Westerns have the same plot. And that is you have a town, it's like Shinbone, a Pleasantville, everything's going well. Then the gangsters come in and take over. And that's what's happened to our country. And then the problem with the gangsters is that they're so ruthless that the ordinary townsman, even the old sheriff with an old rifle, is no match for them. But then over the mountain comes an outsider, and that's Trump. He's a little bit of an unknown figure. He's got a bit of a reputation. There are rumors that he must have done this or done that in his past. But the gangsters recognize immediately that he is their threat and their sole threat. He's the guy that could take them all down. He's the guy they need to focus on. And that's what's going on. The Democrats, they're not, even the assassination attempts. I mean, is anybody trying to assassinate, say, Romney or Paul Ryan? I mean, it's a waste of time. Who would even think of it? Why would you want to do it? Assassination, and I say this in my book, and it's a little bit of a controversial line, but I think you'll know the sense in which I mean it. I say assassination is the sincerest form of flattery. By that, I mean Trump is the one that's been identified as the really scary guy. Scary to the left and to the Democrats and to their schemes. That's why they've targeted him. It's because he was a massive cultural celebrity even before he entered politics. So he has the biggest brand maybe in the world, and he's got the tough guy element. He's the guy who knows how to bully the bullies. Now, notice he never bullies people who are beneath him. You'll never see him bullying a waiter or bullying a doorman and insulting them. He never does that. But what he does is he's an 800-pound gorilla who can take on other 800-pound gorillas, and that's why he's the perfect candidate for the Republican Party. We don't have any other 800-pound gorillas.
No, definitely not. And you're right. He doesn't insult people lower than him. And he doesn't insult entire groups of people, calling them deplorables or gun clingers or Bible clingers. And I think that's so important. He targets people that target him. He calls them out. But then, obviously the apparatus mobilizes behind them. But everyone needs to check out Vindicating Trump. Go to vindicatingtrump.com. Dinesh, I always enjoy our conversations. Thank you so much for coming on.
It's a real pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at pasreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.